Good morning, and welcome to the Museum of the San Ramon Valley's virtual speaker series. I'm Dan Dunn, the director of the museum. Today, we're a year old. Today is the 12th presentation in this monthly series. Past presentations have included the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, California's first people, then and now, the Alamo Pioneer Cemetery, and last month, John Muir, California's most famous resident. In recognition of Memorial Day, our presentation today is entitled Sheriff Veal and the Pursuit of a Worthy Memorial, the story of Contra Costa County's Soldiers Monument. Our presenter is John Mercurio, president of the Contra Costa Historical Society. It's hard to miss. It's 45 feet tall and almost in the middle of Monument Boulevard. John will tell us the story of how it was built, how it arrived at its current location, and some of the controversies that have surrounded it. Please use the chat window at the bottom of the screen for any questions you have. Feel free to send the questions in at any time during the presentation, and we'll address them at the end. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to John Mercurio. John?
Thanks, Dan, for this opportunity to talk about, I'm going to share my screen here, talk about something that I've been interested in for a long time, since I was very young. And that's the Soldiers Monument. This is a presentation that I first prepared for the Rossmore chapter of the DAR in 2018 on the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Now I'm very pleased to present it again to this rather different audience, and I've expanded some of the content to fit the time available. So with a subject like this, I always kind of wonder when I'm doing these things, how far back do I go to begin the story? And I think in this case, we need to go back to the start of the war that led to the need to create the memorial. So it was a wrong turn that led to the Archduke's car being in a position for an assassin's shot. That fatal attack on the Archduke and his wife began a chain of events that embroiled many countries and led to a worldwide conflict. After strong resistance by President Wilson, America entered the war in April of 1917 in response to the sinking of American merchant vessels by German U-boats. And up there on the right half of the slide, you see the lyrics to a song called Over There, which I remember this song growing up. I always thought it was a World War II song, and it was, but it was actually written for World War I and then brought out again, perfectly good application in World War II as well. And it was a very popular song ever since. Some American young men found themselves caught up in the patriotic fervor, but until reality set in under battle conditions. But ultimately, the fresh American troops joining the Allied final offensive helped turn the tide. The armistice on November 11th, 1918 meant the end to a costly, bloody war. 117,000 American deaths and 77 here in Contra Costa County. The local papers brought the news of the sensation of hostilities home. Here in Contra Costa County, Sheriff Richard Veal, an established leader, having served as sheriff since 1895, was especially grateful. His son Mortimer, who was one of those who joined the fighting in the Navy, came home safely, And Veal wanted a great gesture to honor the war veterans. But before we get into what he did to create the memorial, I'd like to delve a little bit into the life of one of Contra Costa County's most memorable citizens. Veal was born in 1864 and attended schools in Petaluma, followed by Stockton Business College. He took on the family farm. He operated the family farm in the Brentwood area and literally drained the swamp in the early 1890s, creating Veal Tract, 2,000 acres of former Thule land. And if you look at a map a map that shows the Delta, you'll see an area called Veal Tract there. And I remember when I first started getting involved in the local history of Contra Costa County in a little more detail, and the name Veal came up, I kind of went back to, I love maps. And so I remember wondering if there's any connection to Veal Tract and Sherman Field, and there is. He was, he basically made sure that happened to get that land reclaimed to be farmland. And then still as a young man, he became interested in politics and won the seat of county sheriff in 1894. He held that post from 1895 until he lost his reelection bid in 1935. With 40 years of service, he was the longest serving county sheriff in American history. And when you stop and think about that, if he started in 1895, it was still, horses. And telegraphs, maybe, when he retired, it was, cars chasing criminals, teletypes, radios and all that sort of thing. Very different. He's very proud of the fact that he never shot anybody he was dealing with, any criminals. And he was also, this is kind of the amazing part, he was a civic booster of Contra Costa County, and for decades was one of the most prominent citizens of the county. He was instrumental in the creation of the Richmond Inner Harbor and was involved with the State Highway Commission in bringing the first section of State Highway to the county, which would have been from Martinez along the shoreline, basically towards to near San Pablo. And at the Contra Costa County History Center, we have quite a trove of material related to his life and career. They like to say that, he never threw anything away. So now we have it. And it's possible to really go into some detail about him, but we don't have the time for that here. So getting back to the memorial, in 1922, he got the Board of Supervisors involved as a sponsor of this memorial project. A letter was sent to all auto owners in the county asking them to contribute $2. And this initial fundraising effort yielded $1,100. Obviously not enough to build a memorial of any significance. So Veal was put in charge of fundraising and used his power of persuasion and contacts to raise money for the project. He was persistent and managed to get material contributions of steel, sand, concrete, gravel, and lumber. The value of all this amounted to about $30,000. Really, at the time, he was probably the best person to take on something like that, being the type of person that he was and the, the exposure that he had. The designer selected for the tower was initially Ralph Stackpole, who advised on the design, but the final designer was Clifford White. This is a scale model that was made during the time, actually out of concrete, to show for, planning purposes what the memorial was going to look like. Ralph Stackpole was a San Francisco artist who designed parts of the Pan Pacific Exposition and was active in the labor movement in the 1920s and 30s and was a friend of the muralist Diego Rivera. Clifford White was also a friend of Diego Rivera and painted some of the murals in Coit Tower. Probably lots of you have been to Coit Tower up on Telegraph Hill there and seen those really nice murals that were restored some time back. It's sort of that same style as what we see on this memorial. One of the doughboys depicted on the monument is an African American, and one of the dead listed on the plaque is Hazel Brandon, a nurse who died of pneumonia. The tower is 45 feet tall and 12 feet wide on each side at the base. It's made of poured concrete and has an interior stair to a viewing platform. The interior portion is now closed to the public. The dedication got great news coverage in the entire area. Sherman Field was the host, and invited participants were veterans and their families and friends, county officials, Gold Star mothers, and members of the Native Sons of the Golden West who supervised formal dedication of the monument. Sheriff Veal tried to get Governor Young to attend, but he wasn't able to make it. And we see there on the right side of the platform there is Veal actually speaking to the group. The oratory was high and inspirational, as illustrated by this quote from the event. Put mind and shoulder together to prevent a repetition of the causes that drove these martyrs to their graves. The dedication was a major affair, attracting 3,000 to 4,000 people. Space for parking was provided by the Hook family, who owned the adjacent property. And incidentally, the location of this dedication was identified in all the publicity as Hookston, since Pleasant Hill was not yet developed. Now a little side road, so to speak, on the Victory Highway. Victory Highway, the monument was located right on the Victory Highway. And the Victory Highway was a marked route created in 1921 and following existing state highways from New York City to San Francisco. This was during a time before the US numbered highway system was implemented. And so people followed named highways with, the signage for the highway posted all along the way. In California in 1926, the Victory Highway was routed over the just opened Antioch Bridge and through Contra Costa County via Concord on Monument Road and south to Walnut Creek on Main Street. So this is the pavement being laid between Antioch and the Antioch Bridge. A series of Victory Eagle sculptures were to be placed at each county line along the transcontinental route. Only 6 were installed, and 1 was there at the approach to the Antioch Bridge. Now, the Victory Highway Association originally hoped that this Victory Eagle sculpture would be placed at the, it was the local boosters, the memorial boosters. Original hope that this sculpture would be placed at the junction where the memorial tower would end up being built. But there was an Eastern Contra Costa County business group that was also involved, and they were able to have what they call the Screaming Eagle installed at the Antioch Bridge. So it was close to the Contra Costa end of the Antioch Bridge. But actually, if you're thinking in greater terms, that was really a more appropriate location for it, because it was the intent of the Victory Highway Association's national plan to install them at county lines. And the foot of the Antioch Bridge is pretty much where the county line is, since its precise location is out in the river. The monument occupied a prominent location in a triangle of land at the junction of 2 important roads. Monument Road, later Boulevard, was not named for this monument. The name was already in use, recognizing the presence of a land grant boundary monument. Now, there was another little sort of controversy here about the routing of the Victory Highway. So Victory Highway, if you're just looking at this here, it came in from the left and then turned and went straight down the highway as you're looking in the distance there on the right. But there was a group from Stockton, the Stockton Chamber of Commerce. They made a bid to be on the route of the Victory Highway. And the Antioch Chamber of Commerce, in conjunction with Contra Costa County's chamber and others in the county, mounted a campaign in 1924 letter to use Sheriff Veal's influence to keep the route in Contra Costa County. So, not sure, what the reason was at this point, but the route stayed in Contra Costa County. This is a nice overhead view of the area north of the monument, probably in the 1940s, with Sherman Field, the dominant feature. So Sherman Field, that looks like a big X there, those are runways. And that is where the subdivision Sherman Acres is now constructed. And the road that's running diagonally across the bottom half, that's what's now Monument Boulevard, with the Southern Pacific Railroad right-of-way running across the bottom of the screen there, which is now part of that Iron Horse Trail. And on the far left in the middle is I don't have a pointer, which is unfortunate, but the monument is there. It's a small white tower, barely visible. It was significant enough of a landmark to be shown on road maps from this Thomas Brother map, and the enlargement I have there around the red box. You can see it a little bit better. It says there's that triangle of land at the road intersection, and then it says Memorial Monument, and you also see there that it's labeled Sherman Airfield. So in the earlier history of the monument, it was kind of stark around there. Not much landscaping, but it did have some military guns. You can see them at the base of the monument there. But then later on, the shrubs had grown up and the guns were gone. So around 1960, the freeway, which we see on the bottom of the screen there, State Route 21, soon to be numbered as I-680. You can see it ending near the monument. And by this time, the monument had been moved about 800 feet south to Boyd Road, to where the red arrow is. So the yellow arrow is where the memorial was built, and it was moved 800 feet south to the intersection with Boyd Road. The reason for the move was to accommodate road improvements at the intersection, which was built about the same time as the freeway, a little bit before. The freeway was extended to the north in 1964. And one last thing there, if you look right above the yellow arrow, you'll see kind of some concentric curves there. That was the old drive-in. I don't know how many people remember that. I do. But the drive-in theater was a thriving business, I know, in those days. The monument over time has evolved from a memorial to the dead of World War I to a commemoration of the service given by veterans of all wars, as these stone tablets show, and some other plaques. For many years, the monument was surrounded on three sides by streets: the on-ramp to southbound 680, Boyd Road, and North Main Street. The freeway improvements in the late 1990s changed the street pattern to what it looks like now. This is how it appears currently. This is a photo during a Memorial Day event. And some really important changes were made when this was renovated. They built a ramp so that it was accessible by the disabled, and allowed some parking there so that you could get to it much easier. Much more accommodating. So these tablets show those lost in World War I by name, and on the right, the rededication in 1998, when the memorial was restored using funds from the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors and other contributions. While it is important to recognize the 77 who gave their lives, the total number of Contra Costa County residents who served in World War I was 6,341. I'd like to acknowledge that I could not have done this presentation without help from the folks at Contra Costa County Historical Society and the Martinez Historical Society. And I had help from Janet, Lisa, and Margie at Contra Costa County Historical Society, and Andrea from Martinez Historical Society. They all helped me tremendously. So we invite you to stop in and say hi, maybe get a tour. And yes, that really is the sheriff's hat. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Couple questions. Is there any difference between the Lincoln Highway and the Victory Highway?
Before I do that, I probably ought to, I'm not sure what the folks are seeing here. Are they, should I make any changes to the screen or just continue?
Seems to me you can just keep going.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, the Lincoln Highway and the Victory Highway. The Lincoln Highway is the one that I think more people are aware of, and it did come into the Bay Area, into Oakland and later into San Francisco. The Victory Highway, so the Lincoln Highway was established in 1913, the Victory Highway in 1921. So the Lincoln Highway kind of had a head start. But the Victory Highway was followed in very similar route between the same two endpoints. But I think it was, and I know it was shorter than the Lincoln Highway because it took a more direct route across the bay. Closer to us, the Lincoln Highway went across the northern part of the county, and the Victory Highway came in over the Antioch Bridge from the direction of Sacramento. And just a little kind of side note about that, if you look at certain detailed maps, just north of the Antioch Bridge, you'll see a road there that's still called the Victory Highway. It's been bypassed by the main road, but it's still a little local road there, and it still is called the Victory Highway.
Okay. Sheriff Veal, who we see on screen at the moment,
Yeah.
as you said, he's, he seems to have that dynamic personality and was seemingly the best person to do the fundraising necessary for this for the monument. I'm always interested in those people that span like a couple centuries. I mean, here he is being born at the tail end of the Civil War, and he's retiring a few years before World War II. Any other good Sheriff Veal stories for us?
Well, I mentioned that, he was very proud of his law enforcement career and that he never shot anybody. But, he solved, there were some pretty visible crimes in that, over 40 years, it's bound to be. But there was one particular crime that happened at the Selby Smelter over in West County. And so in the course of investigating this crime, the sheriff, I guess he kind of had a suspect in mind, and the person in mind, it turned out, had been was known to be on vacation, but also known to have not gone anywhere. And so they went over to his house, and there was a sign on there that said, basically, anybody trying to enter will be shot. So that was kind of a red flag. So they looked in the window, and of course you got to keep in mind this was a different time. But Sheriff Veal later said that since I was the smallest man there, I was the one that was boosted up through the window. So they went into They went into this fellow's house and they found a dirt encrusted revolver. Well, that was a red flag. So they found the guy over in San Rafael and they arrested him. They brought him back and he confessed to the crime. What the crime was, he tunneled into the office of the Selby smelter and accessed the strong box and dropped gold bars down into the tunnel that he built, and by himself laboriously brought these gold bars out and dumped them in, just kind of threw them into the bay, obviously with the intention of retrieving them later. Well, he confessed before he could get to them, and they recovered all the gold. So I think that's pretty safe to say that's an unusual crime, and he thought he was proud that he he had a hunch that guy was the guy, and he was right.
That's a good story. Question came in, when did Hookston become Pleasant Hill?
Oh, let's see. I think it started being called Pleasant Hill maybe in the early 50s, perhaps. I'm not really too sure about it. But, probably around the time when the subdivision started being built, maybe late 40s, early 50s.
Did Hookston disappear at that point?
Well, Hookston, there was more than one Hookston. There was a Hookston on the Southern Pacific Railroad, a siding. There's also one on the Sacramento Northern Railroad, and they shipped a lot of the pears that were grown out from those points and other crops. But no, I don't think there's any. There's some walnut processing warehouses and such on Hookston Road and the Iron Horse Trail. So yeah, there's a little bit left.
Okay. For anybody that's going out to the monument, the plaques are very interesting to me, and I do remember reading the names of the Contra Costa residents that had died in the war, and Hazel's name stuck out. Do we know anything more of Hazel?
That's a good question. I mean, I know a little bit. I'd kind of like to know more. That might be a subject of future research. But Hazel was a nurse serving in San Diego, and she caught pneumonia and died there. So she never had a chance to serve overseas. But she was definitely, a nurse active during the time of World War I. And, perhaps would have been over in the European theater.
Okay. On another plaque, I noticed I guess these were the entities that helped to fund the monument. And there were a lot of construction companies listed, a lot of newspapers listed. Was that kind of typical for the time, or at least in this circumstance?
Typical for what typical that they support something like this?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's still true. I mean, any time a public facility such as this, especially a memorial, they always, a lot of times certain private organizations, want to be part of it. But I would attribute that to Sheriff Veal and his stature and his persistent nature, as they say, getting these folks to jump on board and, come up with the materials and such to build it, because that was where it was going to come from. I mean, the county wasn't going to really, foot the bill for it, county government.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Sheriff Veal, a question came in, are there any Veal family members around?
There are, and their names escape me right now. I apologize for that. But yeah, there are some family members still around, yes.
And we mentioned the fact that there is an interior stairwell that led up to a viewing platform. And there is a small door that's on the memorial or on the monument. That's closed to the public, you mentioned.
Yes.
Do we know approximately when that was closed?
No, I don't know when that was.
Okay,
Probably a really long time ago.
all right. Yeah, the door looks rather ancient. Okay. John, I think that's it for questions. And I want to thank you for your presentation. You cleared up a lot of the mystery for that monument, and I'd certainly like to encourage people to go out and take a look at it. It's a very interesting place and one that speaks of really the meaning of Memorial Day. So thank you for your information today.
Yeah, I would agree. It is a good place to go check out, especially now. And I thank you all for giving me this opportunity to shed a little light on it. So
You know what? I think I've got some information that we might benefit from. This person wrote in that Sheriff Veal's great-grandchildren are Oliver Brian Bray, and Margot Bray.
I should have known that. Oliver
Yeah.
Bray is on the Contra Costa County Historical Society board.
Okay,
Oliver for missing that one.
got it.
Yeah.
You get to ask them now. And I'd like to thank again, John, and I thank you all for viewing this morning. If you missed any of our earlier programs, you can find them by visiting the museum's website at museumsrv.org. Today's program will appear early next week. Our next program will be on Thursday, June the 17th at 11:30. June is the anniversary of the museum's depot building move, and Ed Best, museum docent, will tell us the story of the depot being moved and restored to the building that we see today. If you like these programs and want them to continue, we ask that you make a donation by going to the museum's homepage, museumsrv.org, and clicking on the Donate Now button. The museum is also in need of volunteers. If you can give us some time, please contact the museum. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Stay safe, and thank you for watching.